Welcome to The Creative Shift. My name is Dan Blank, author of the book Be the Gateway and founder of WeGrowMedia.com. So today I want to ask the question of, would you take this creative risk? Recently interviewed author Olivia Blackburn. She talked about a situation in her career, and it really had me thinking all week about this idea of really what the podcast is about, which is a creative shift, intentionally taking a risk to try something new or to move ahead with your craft or your career. So the situation I want to propose is, imagine this. You are an aspiring novelist and you finally write this book and you get an agent, and then your agent and you get a deal with a big publisher. And for the story, we're going to say it's Disney Hyperions. This is, big brands, lots of expertise, and they're going to take you into the marketplace. So would you, 6 months before your novel comes out, say, oh, I've got an idea for promoting this. I wrote this little, novella. It's like a prequel, the short story. So I want to take this short story that kind of sets up the book, and I want to self-publish it on Amazon 6 months ahead of the publisher releasing the book. And you have this idea, and you take it to your publisher, and they say, oh, this makes us really nervous. And they're just not supportive of it. They say they're nervous. They're not encouraging you to move ahead with it. Would you go ahead and publish that short story on Amazon ahead of your traditional publisher publishing the actual book? So Olivia told this story, and as you might guess, of course, she did go on to self-publish that short story ahead of time. You can hear all of this in my interview with her, which is the previous episode to this one. And it really, really jumped out at me because all I do is talk to writers and talk to creators. And I grew up as the art kid. I've always been surrounded by creative people. And what I was trying to imagine was lots of myself or lots of people being in that situation where you wrote a book you're so proud of, and it was such a long road to get there. And you get an agent who you really resonate with, and they get you this book deal, or you and the agent get this book deal with a publisher you're really excited about. And then they're nervous about something you want to do. And even on paper, it can feel like, I'm trying to think of other examples. Like if you were going to open a restaurant and you got a partner in that restaurant business, and you got a lease with, for that restaurant, and you're gonna launch that restaurant on a certain day, and then as you're doing so many things, hiring and menu and all the things it takes to do a restaurant together, you say, oh, but first I want to get I'm gonna rent a food cart. I'm gonna put it out front, not with the chef that we're doing. This sort of thing where we're gonna take a very scaled down version of it that is not really with my other partners, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to sell some food 6 months ahead of our restaurant opening with the beautiful interior design and the chef and the full menu, which is not done yet, the trained staff, the look and the feel, all of that. You can imagine how the partners might be like, well, why don't we just wait for this beautiful thing that we're creating and that we have launched again and again? And I can see a lot of authors too having this idea and being excited about it. And then even if they just get a tone from their publisher that says, we're nervous about that, it feels so logical and so rational to think, you know what? This publisher, these editor and marketing team and all the people in that, they've done this again and again. Why am I trying to, do something that's making them nervous? Why don't I just let it happen? Let's let them prepare for this book to come out and release the book, and I will be an active part of that. But why do I have to do this other thing that's in addition to the book that they're really nervous about because it affects the book? I just kept thinking of all those narratives that as a writer or artist or any kind of creator, you would have of saying, okay, it was a good idea. I would be excited, but if they're not excited about it, if they're nervous about it, let me not do it. So, as you again would have guessed, she did go ahead and self-publish this. And it was really interesting because it wasn't just that she self-published it. She said, I worked my butt off to get that novella into people's hands for free. I was chasing people down on Goodreads who had been interested in the book that she's coming out with. I got reviews. I set it for free on Amazon. And I got a whole bunch of downloads once it was free. So it wasn't just she released something and was like, hoping. She was really working at anyone she'd ever met, anyone who'd expressed interest in her work or anything. She was chasing them down to get reviews, to kind of build buzz around this free short story. And she concluded that it really helped with launch, that you can see it in the numbers for Midnight Thief, which is the full novel that came out 6 months later. And she said that once the sales started coming in, her publisher came around. I love stories like that, not because I want any individual to take a risk that they don't want to take. Not that I think people should do anything, but just this idea that she believed in it so fervently, she was willing to take that risk and really follow through with it. And that's a big part of it. It's one thing to take a risk. It's another thing to really follow through and own that. And she really feels that this really contributed to Midnight Thief becoming a success. And it went on to become a New York Times bestselling book. And I just kind of love that. And again, talking with Livia Blackburn, by the way, I don't even think I said her full name earlier. So her name is Livia Blackburn. The previous episode tells her full story. You have to check it out. It's so great. But throughout her career, to focus on these creative shifts, again, the title of this podcast, where for years ahead of time, she was pursuing a career in science. So she had gone to Harvard. She was getting her PhD at MIT in cognitive neuroscience. And she said, a couple years into her PhD, she realized this is not for me. And then I quote, I still stayed in the program for 8 years and got my PhD. And then right after she graduated, I think she might have worked a year in a lab, but she basically totally switched gears to become a full-time writer. And that, I think, is another thing I try to think about a lot of scenarios that I might be in or anyone might be in. And there's such a, I think it's called like a sunk cost fallacy, that if you have spent all of your high school years and all your undergrad years and all your graduate years pursuing a highly specialized degree that is so difficult to get, that it would be so easy to justify, I'm not going to waste the last decade of my life that work. Of course I'm going to pursue that career. And I'll do writing on the side, or I'll do writing when things, quote unquote, calm down, or let me just submit some essays. And again, it was this idea of Livia having to figure out where she wanted to put her energy and being proactive in it. And again, I'm not someone who likes these big, daring, bold moves. I'm not encouraging anyone to quit their job or just take a hard turn in their career. But when it really aligns with who that person is and where they want to go and how hard they're willing to work, it's inspiring when I see people do it. And recently she had another big creative shift where she had authored a children's book. And prior to that, she'd really written YA fantasy. The book came out earlier this year. It's done really well. She's working on another one. And it was interesting because she's got a whole bunch of books in the lineup, and many of them are not in the YA fantasy genre. They're middle grade, or they're just in a different kind of area. And when we were talking, she had actually expressed, I don't know when I'll go back to YA fantasy. I might not ever go back to it. And that was interesting to me as well. Someone who has built something that so many writers dream of, I've gotten a book out there. I've gotten several books out there in this one genre, and I've been doing pretty good. I've got a fan base, all of that. But now I'm being drawn to this other thing. So I'm still going to write. There's going to be a lot of connection points, but I'm going to hit pause on that for a little bit. And I think it's such a brave thing to do. I've spoken with so many writers and artists and illustrators and musicians and creators of all kinds who feel stuck. They feel, I'm known for X and I want to grow beyond that, but people know me for it. My publisher expects it of me, all that stuff. And it's not just they feel trapped in it, they stay trapped in it. And whenever I find a story like Livia, where she wanted to branch out in new ways and she did that, it just so inspires me, just fills my heart. And she ended with this amazing statement that I want to read because it sort of illustrates why I love this, why I talk about this, why I do this podcast for it. She says, "My career keeps opening up. I just sold another picture book and just closed a deal on a book completely different genre that wasn't on my radar until 2 months ago. So again, this thing's just coming up. Plus, I'm working on a middle grade book. I don't know when I'm going back to fantasy at this point, or if I will. I feel like I'm growing a lot as an artist. It feels the same as when I was just beginning to write, which is a nice feeling to have. I'm closing in on a decade in my writing career, and it's nice to feel myself growing at this point." I mean, that's it right there. That I love. That idea that we create because we have something to say, because we are learning about ourselves and about the world, and because we are growing, and that is connecting with people. Highly recommend you check out the Livia Blackburn episode of the podcast. We dig into all this in much greater detail. And I would challenge you to consider the questions I've asked in this episode about, would you do that marketing campaign? Would you make that shift? Again, not because I'm encouraging you or anyone to take a overly risky move that you don't feel good about. It's that if there's something you really want to do that feels right to you, consider what it would take to pursue that. Doesn't have to be a bold move like Livia's made here. They can be small, incremental, safe changes. But I love how she concluded this idea of feeling fulfilled and full of growth. And I want that for everyone. My name again is Dan Blank. You can find me at wegrowmedia.com. This has been the Creative Shift Podcast. And you can find me on social media at Dan Blank. Thank you so much for listening until the end.